I now invite our first keynote, Boris Gloger, to deliver his talk. And please, ladies and gentlemen, our 2-year-old guest speaker, Laura.
Do I really need to, cool. Can I get this? Morning. Of course, I hope I don't need to carry her for the next 45 minutes. My request is whenever you see a small girl running around in this building, going out on the street, please protect her and stop her. So, what I've heard yesterday afternoon in the speakers dinner is 80% of all companies in Bosnia are already agile, right? Is this the truth? Well, then I can stop. I mean, by the way. So I try I started doing Agile 2001. In 2001, I did Agile in an environment. I called it always a hostile environment. You try to do Agile, Scrum, and this time we didn't call it Agile, we called it Scrum. We did it in a hostile environment. We believe the product owner is a different kind of a boss. The Scrum Master is not the manager. And we try to implement a couple of practices, right? Is there a presentation available somewhere? Oh, cool. And we started doing this thing here, okay? Maybe that's the very first picture that Ken Schwaber created about Scrum, and it was very helpful, by the way. I mean, we believed it starts with a thing called backlog, then you have a strange, very magical working process called Scrum. By the way, it's nothing else than a Deming cycle from the 1940s, and every day, I mean, by the way, it's 30-day sprints, and that was supposed to be a very short time frame. 20 years ago, okay, a very short time frame, and we had a cool meeting called Daily Scrum, and when we tried to start to implement Scrum in other organizations, we had been very, very lucky when people did the Daily Scrum once or 2 times a week. That was the start of the beginning, and everybody believed, of course, Scrum is not a magic bullet or the so-called silver bullet. Everybody who did Scrum tried to express it's not a silver bullet, but we wanted to sell it like a silver bullet, you know. And it was very successful. And a lot of people believed this is Agile. There's a framework. And this framework is everything you need to do. And in the beginning, it worked. In the beginning, it worked this way. And I always wondered why a couple of years later, when we started to introduce these kind of methodologies like Agile or later on a little bit of Kanban or Crystal or these kind of things, why did it not work anymore when we started working with more traditional type, or at least with people who haven't been in the mood of discovering this kind of activities themselves, okay? The evangelists, the very first 30 people, they discovered that for themselves and they tried something out. And although none of these people, none, not even myself, has ever done Scrum in the same way as we teach us today, we had been super successful. And I always wondered, what is the difference? And why do we need now thousands of methodologies? I mean, why do we now need less holacracy? Why do we need now SAFe? By the way, whoever does SAFe, you are doomed. But of course we knew there are a lot of principles, okay? And the most important, there was some no estimates today, right? There's a presentation, no estimates? Yeah. So the basic idea was when you understand that you change the triangle and you fix budget and time, then you don't need to do estimates anymore because budget and time is fixed. I mean, if this is clear, you know, then you don't need no estimate. So all these principles had been there. But then people started again to think about what kind of methodologies can we use? Can we do Scrum, or do we need to do design thinking, or do we need to do a scaled approach? And nowadays everybody is talking about Spotify model, the next new cool thing. Well, by the way, if you talk to people from Spotify, they tell, don't copy us, we do something else nowadays. It's so crazy. People always think about structures. And then you try these structures, and again you will fail, again and again and again, because there's some very important thing was completely missing in all the ideas when we started doing Scrum and Agile. There's a thing called leadership. And teams will only succeed if there is leadership in place. And in the beginning, we believe, wow, the Scrum Master is not the new boss. Of course he's not a new boss. An Agile leader, an Agile coach is not a new boss. Yes, they are not a new boss, but they are very, very strong leaders, and they need to be very strong leaders if they want to have success with their implementations, or if they want to have effective teams. And then you can go back and think again, what the hell are we doing? I mean, do we really need to have all these methodologies, or do we need to have a very simple framework? And the first and the shortest abbreviation of Agile was the Agile Heart, so to say, was done by Alistair Coburn 2 years or 3 years ago, and he said, ask the teams, by the way, a multidisciplinary team. A lot of people don't get it in the Agile world. Multidisciplinary means not only software or not only hardware development, it means everybody you need to have to build the product, okay? Or if it's not a product, to build the service. Or if it's not the service and a whole organization, to build an organization. So a multidisciplinary team. And then these teams have to deliver in short iterations. And maybe in the beginning, it's not a short iteration, it's 30 days. Well, it was a short iteration, you know? And when you start with a short with that iteration, then you build an increment, then you reflect on your activities and your success stories, or your successes, and then you repeat the whole process again. And if you do that, then you can create methodologies like OKRs, objective and key results, the new kid on the block, basically exactly the same thing for a whole organization. You can do Kanban with cadence aspects, then you have again this kind of circle. You can do Scrum, you can do design thinking, it's always the same. But we are still talking about methodology. And what we're missing is, if we talk about methodologies, then we are missing that leadership approach, and that's the thing I'm talking about right now. But we also will miss that there's much, much more in place that we really need to think about. One of the first things you need to make clear, whenever you get resistance in your implementation of an Agile, if you want to change something, then most of the time the problem is not people don't want. The problem is also not that they are not allowed to do things, because that's the thing we are working on with our Agile practices. It's most of the time the problem that people have no clue about how to behave in an Agile environment, if they have no clue how to work in short iterations. It's their skills are missing. Their typical skills are missing. You will talk about IoT today. Who's an expert in IoT nowadays, right? Who's an expert in automation? Who's an expert in all these new technology innovations? Then you need to have a different kind of architectures. We will here talk about microservices today. Microservices is already a 10-year-old idea. And some software developers still don't get it. Or developers maybe, but the architects don't. Sorry for this bashing. Agile is still an infrastructure, okay? I mean, I had been a couple of weeks ago in a telecom company, and this company and the telecom companies are really great. I mean, they create infrastructures, you know, usually connectivity. And the funny thing is, when you try to get Wi-Fi in their buildings, try it. There's none. So, or you do Agile product development, okay? So what is Agile product development? What do you need to build an Agile product? And by the way, Agile product development is a very old idea. We just put it now, we just say now it's Agile. it's a very old idea, you don't know what the customer really wants, yeah? And you can't understand what the customer really wants. The basic idea is I need to understand what the customer needs, but you can't ask the customer what he needs. That's a big issue. So all the ideas of waterfall are doomed because that principle is not solved. By the way, there is a methodology that does this. It's called design thinking. I don't try to understand by asking the client what he wants. I observe the client and try to figure out myself what he needs. And that changes the whole dynamic. And of course, some people still don't get the simple principles about Agile. You have to finish, okay? Stop starting, start finishing. Is more or less the basic idea behind Agile practices. So, but when you talk about all that, then one thing is sometimes missing. You can all of these practices, you can all of these things very, very thoroughly. You can start teaching people about these skills. You can try to talk to software architects about microservices. You can talk about infrastructure with the IT departments. You can try to do everything in place that is necessary to do Agile, and some people believe you have to do that first before you can start doing Agile, and yet they are still failing. Because one thing is really important, we need to change the way we think about leadership. We think about not basically on the idea that you need to lead people, but you need to think about in a different way how to do leadership in an Agile environment. And and the basic idea I would like to express with a very, very old concept is called the Open Space Conference, a typical, complete different approach than this conference, by the way. So the Open Space Conference is a very, very, very nice metaphor for Agile leadership. An Open Space Conference starts by an invitation. So the invitation is the first super important aspect of Agile leadership. Who has done Scrum? So, who has a team, who of the ones who do Scrum has a team that has voluntarily assigned to be part of this team? So, first big issue, you know, you try to do Scrum with people who got assigned, they drawn into these teams, okay? And what would happen with the motivation? And then you start thinking about the motivation of people. They don't do Scrum. They're not effective. The managers are saying something like they don't want. But it started with the wrong idea. I put people in a team, so I put them. They don't pull the project. So the basic idea is with an invitation, you ask people, ask the team, if they would like to be in your team, right? To be able to do that, you need to have at least one person who says, I have a cool idea, we call that product vision, by the way, I have a cool idea, and who would like to join? So these guys, or the people in that specific team that you just created, I mean, they are motivated. It's like starting a startup, okay? So, and then you don't talk about motivation anymore. So, because they committed, that's the commitment. If you accept an invitation, this is the definition of commitment. If you accept an invitation, then you are motivated because you want it, right? And if you accept a commitment and you create an invitation in a way that within that invitation you phrase the constraints openly by, for instance, we have only 50,000 euros and we have to be done in 30 days. And by the way, it will be a big issue, and I don't know exactly how much if we can do that without working on the weekends. And by the way, it's super hard in a hostile environment. Do you like to join that challenge? And then people don't mind to work the whole weekend, right? because they accept the invitation and they're knowing their constraints. And the most important aspect of all invitations is what is in for me. Okay? Birthday party, you don't go for the person who has the birthday. You go for the cake. So what is in for me? You join an invitation typically because you need to, you have an idea, at least you have an idea what you want out of that thing. People in my company, and I'm flabbergasted at the moment, people in my company talked to me a couple of days ago, we are here because we got a super cool education. You are you're obviously the most successful Scrum Agile consulting company in Germany. We would like to have a super nice education offered by you. We worked very hard for 4 years, but then we would like to start our own company. So, returningly, Boris Gloger creates his competitors. Really, it's cool. I mean, I created 5 or 6. I trained Andreas as a certified ScrumTrainer a couple of years ago. So that's what is in for me, okay? That's the metaphor. So and then people join the company, the team, the startup, whatever. And so the person who created that invitation, how do you call this guy? That's the host, right? And I don't know how it's in your home. When you have a kind of a party or you create an invitation, then typically you have house rules. Like no smoking, okay? Something like that. It's your home, your rules. So there's no idea of in an ordinary environment that there are no rules. And if you accept an invitation, implicitly you will accept the rules of the host. Well, at least you should know what are the rules are, okay? If that person has very crazy rules, okay? You are not allowed to sit or something like that. Then he did it beforehand in his invitation, made that clear, and you do a commitment, then all is fine. But if you change your rules in course of your project, you change the constraints, then you need to negotiate the invitation again. Very simple principle. That's the basic idea about being transparent and openly in an agile context. So we have an invitation. So people would like to join the party, the conference, the projects, the company, and so on. And in an agile environment or in an open space conference, that was our metaphor, then you create a circle of people. And that circle is called marketplace. And marketplace is the best metaphor for that what happens in an agile organization. Every agile organization is more or less a marketplace. And how does a marketplace works? You have different small companies usually, like here, the booth that are out there here in the streets. And each small company, small booth, small team is responsible for being successful themselves. Nobody cares in a marketplace if a small company will not survive because they don't make revenue. It's not the problem of the marketplace holder to make that sure. He creates an infrastructure, he creates an idea, he creates a setting that it is possible. So on that marketplace, there are still rules. It's because the person or the organization who creates that marketplace creates some infrastructure and has some ground rules that we need to comply to be part of that marketplace, right? And that's the same in an open space conference. There's a marketplace created, and then the organization or the organizer of that marketplace, facilitator of that marketplace, he's the one who explains a couple of simple rules. First, rule number 1, the law of 2 feet. Law of 2 feet means you have to make clear in your mind that everything you do in that conference is on voluntarily basis. You are accepted. You should accept invitations, but if you feel you can't contribute anymore to a project, session, or whatever, then feel free to walk away. That's okay. Okay. So we have this circle. And now the people in that circle, in that marketplace, are asked to create their offers. In a conference, it's called session. In an agile company, it's called create your team. By creating a team, you need to come up with a vision for that team, right? So you get the idea. So and now you need to have in an open space conference. Now you create a kind of an agenda, a grid where you publish all ideas with some settings like what is the room, where are we, location, and dates and so on. And you could do that exactly in an agile organization in the same way, maybe with a digital marketplace, or you have a very great hall like in this building here, and you do it with paper. That's also possible. So and people now assign themselves. You have a host, it's the session host, and you have this very simple law that you try to say whoever is attending is still in charge of his own success, okay, or his own fortune. So, and to make it a little bit acceptable for everybody in the organization, that if some people walk away, you create 2 additional roles. You say, well, we have bumblebees, and bumblebees are people who go to a session, contribute a little bit, then they take the information from that session and they go into another session and they contribute a little bit and then take the information and they go to another session. It's a bumblebee, like the bumblebee is flying from one flower to the next one. And in Spotify model, that is called a chapter. People have similar interests starting going together, or it's called a guild. But the principle is exactly the same thing. People who would like to exchange information across teams in an agile environment, they try to call it a guild. The funny thing is, and back to agile leadership, in a traditional organization, it's immediately called chapter lead, who organizes that. In a traditional organizations, if you call someone the lead, what does this guy become? A boss. Not because that person would like to be that boss. And we will have a talk about culture today. It's about people who think if he is a lead, I give him the responsibility for leading me. So now he shall do decisions, right? But as we saw, the law of 2 feet is still applied. It's your job. You are your own chairman, it's called in all facilitation techniques. So it's still, also we have someone who creates a kind of a new cross-organizational idea, like a chapter or a guild. I'm still in charge by attending that specific session or piece of things. So, then we have the butterflies. And the butterflies are people who commit and they sit down and they stay. In some organizations, I mean, I don't know if all of you have been in university and then you did these study groups, and there are always only 1 or 2 people who do the work, right? And all the others still. Well, that's a common thread. That is the case. And of course, you complain about all the other stupid people, but anyway, right? This is the core team. These are the butterflies. Yeah? And it is as it is. And the funny thing is, Scrum and Agile always says we don't have managers. We don't have these people who tell people what to do, and that's not entirely true. Even on a marketplace, even on an Agile, in an open conferences, even in an Agile organization, there's at least one person who tries to implement or to create this form of organizational architecture, right? Someone would like to work or would like to have this kind of organization. And maybe it's the founder, or it's the board, or it's a group of people who creates together a cooperative, this kind of organization. But at least they say this is the idea of the organization. And these are the managers. Yeah? Because the manager is the one who creates an environment so that you can work this way. The difference in understanding of a traditional management idea and an agile management idea is that in a traditional organization, typically the manager is also allowed to do decisions beyond the fact that they create the style of the organization. Typically, they also create or think they are needed and allowed to have ideas and make decisions about the products and the services and so on. Yeah. In a very small organizations, there's typically there that you don't have enough people to differentiate between the managers and the people who do the services, right? But in a large organizations, you have people who care for the benefit of the organizations, managers, and people who do the work in terms of creating products or services. In Scrum, we call these guys product owners and Scrum Masters. And therefore, in small organizations, you have the problem that people who are managers and they do the content. In large organizations, you don't need to tie that together. You have one person who is entitled to create the environment, and one person or a couple of persons you build the services. So, and we need managers, but they are not doing the decisions anymore, and only the setup of like our open space conference. Yeah. So first, we have a different kind of setup. We have now ground rules. We have hosts. We have voluntarism. We have a couple of laws. So we created now the framework. What else do you need to understand in an agile leadership approach? What is one of the very most important aspects of doing agile? Any idea? If you're saying start, finishing, stop, starting, working from the top to the bottom, right? Sequence. And in Scrum, this law or this idea was expressed with a very simple value. It was called focus. Yeah? Holding focus. Give a focus or take a focus. And leadership is about orientating people. It's about making absolutely clear this is important, that's not important. This is our enemy, this is not our enemy. This is our purpose, this is not our purpose. And a lot of people confuses Agile with the fact that I would like to achieve something with the idea of I can do whatever I want. So the big issue is alignment in self-organized organizations. So if you had a graph, like on the one axis you put the alignment, and on the other axis you put self-organization. A lot of people think, oh, now we are free, let's go on the axis on self-organization. What do you get? A bunch of people running around doing everybody what he wants to do. So the big issue is alignment. And most organizations try to create that alignment by imposing rules. You are only allowed to do different things when you comply to our rules. And that is in university the same, in school the same, our society tries the same. For instance, alignment on the streets is the red traffic light, right? That's a rule. You try to align people by creating rules. In an agile environment or in an agile leadership approach, you try to reduce the amount of necessary rules to an optimum of 0 rules. Impossible, by the way. Yeah, but that is the basic idea. You try to go down with the rule set, with the amount of rules, but then you need to create something, you need to have another kind of force that drives people in direction of alignment, because you would like to be in this corner. High self-organization and super high alignment. Because effectiveness is only done by the team that works together. Right? I mean, so if you don't have rules, or if you don't want to have rules, then you need to come up with a different idea. And that is called values, culture. The problem with values is you can't impose values. I tried that several times, it doesn't work. The only thing you can do is you can try first to select, the right people. But even by selecting the right people, we are not 100% in the alignment with the idea of having a bringing people voluntarily into your company, right? Or into your team. So what you need to do is you need to come up with a very great value set, and you need to make that super public or attractive, and then you might attract the right people because their value set and the value set of your team or your company meets the value set of these people. And that's not an easy thing to do. And even if you have done this, it might be an issue that you as a leader also have your rucksack with you with a lot of values in your own rucksack that are not very transparent to yourself. We are people. And values, you can express values. I mean, companies do that all again and again and again. They try to say, they have mission statements and visions, and they put posters on the walls, and everybody turns around and says, oh God, not again. They had a leadership, guy, round with some visionary people, and they did a 2-day offsite, and they created these cool posters, and then asked a graphic design agency to come up with a super nice shots of people, and then they put it on the wall, and nobody believes in it, right? The only way to live your values is by living your values. And most people are not very clear. I mean, they say something, but their behavior is different. That's okay. And what I have a dream, my dream is that we can talk about that in an organization. So you would like to do an agile transformation, and someone says, I would like to do an agile value set, like doing focus. Yeah? In the same moment, he says, oh, by the way, we have 2 very important projects. Leadership says, let's do agile. Agile says, focus. Leadership team says, we have super, super important things to do. These are the 10 most important AAA projects. And then people says, what the hell? What is the rule? How do we prioritize? How do we do our work? All around, instead of talking to the leaders and saying to them, by the way, guys, wait a second. Could we talk about again what focus really means? And can we help each other to learn what that means? So can we help each other in regards of, nobody of us knows really what an agile value set is, okay? We need to come up with that in the next 20 to 50 years. Some people are a little bit more advanced, and maybe they tried already, and some companies can doing, but all the others are far, far, far away from doing that. I would love to hear about how Samsung does this. I mean, the Korean culture is not, it's not meant to be a super agile culture, by the way, at least from the Western European point of view. Okay, maybe it's completely wrong. Yeah, super. That was the basic idea, by the way. So it's about how to change that value set, and it's about dialogue. And Agile was always talking about how we created an idea how to impose the rule by having retrospectives. But as long as we talk about in retrospectives about that we need more coffee, it's the wrong discussion. Okay? We need to start thinking about our value sets, because we don't want to impose rules to align people. We would like to create a value set that helps us to go in the same direction. So you need to have a value set. And the most important, or one of the most, really, I mean, there might not be the value set, okay, but at least from my point of view, I strongly believe focus is the first one. And the second is openness, like talking about in a dialogue about the things. Yeah? Maybe it's the third one is courage, like Scrum always said, Because to do that, to be open, to talk to your leaders who would like to be agile, by the way, for instance, Boris, that was not very agile. And can you please change your dialogue or type of dialogue? They said, no, of course not. But anyway, they tried it, you know. So this is openness. We need to think, we need to start creating a culture, not even a culture. It's not about culture. I don't think it's about culture. It's about, the result is a culture. Yeah? You can't say, I would like to have a different culture. You need to have a different behavior, and that will create a different culture. And by having a different behavior, at least we have some guidelines. One guideline is focus. The other guideline is, let's be open, let's be transparent, let's have discussions again and again and again and again. And it looks like that it's not effective, but it is. Because dialogue, if it's dialogue, not a debate, dialogue creates orientation. And orientation is a different type of word for focus. If I know what I have to do, it's focus. So, and maybe the archaic leader 50,000 years ago was the one who says, orientation I do by this way. You go this way or you will be dead by me. Yeah? And the agile way might be, this is a cool idea, would you like to go? But if you don't go this direction, you are not part of my team. And that's absolutely okay. Yeah? I mean, because the leader, or the product owner, for instance, who says, this is the direction of the project, this is the direction. You feel free to go, that's fine, but this is the direction, okay? Even if someone says, by the way, it's not my idea anymore, that's also okay. Yeah. So, value set. You want to have an alignment. Okay, and you would like to create as much self-organization as possible. And now we have an issue. In Agile, we talk about product owners and we talk about Agile coaches or Scrum Masters. And there was a very cool idea by Jeff and by Ken to differentiate about these two responsibilities. One was important. One aspect was orientation in terms of content. That's what we do. And other people believed immediately this is the important person. The product owner is the one who leads the efforts. Okay. The funny thing is, in military organizations, you have officers, and these officers are the ones who give the direction. And typically, you also have a guy within the team who makes sure the team behaves the way we should. Yeah? It's called sergeant. Even the German military organization has this kind of structure. And you know, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland had been military people. Maybe there's a coincidence, I don't know. I never had the chance to ask them. So, so obviously, there is a type of person who has the job to make a team performance. Someone does the orientation from a content point of view, and someone makes sure that we are productive. And this guy in a Scrum context is typically called the Scrum Master. And some people in the non-Scrum content call that a Kanban master. That's really crazy. I'm a Kanban master. And then you have the other content like OKR master. I strongly believe that's just a money-making idea, you know, certification of anyway. But you have these masters. And what you try to do is you try to make clear someone needs to lead a team. And the important aspect, and I don't care how you want to call that person, you can call it team lead, as long as this team lead understands that we change the way we lead. This guy has the job to make sure that we are a productive team. And this person, again, however you want to call it, is not important. Important is that this person needs to do Agile, he needs to impose all these Agile ideas like value sets and self-orientation in a different way. And these are the people, and that's a super, I really liked it. Thank you. I really like that because you are here and you hear all that and you believe in Agile because you are here, right? And it's our job, our people here on that conference to get into the market because it's still not there, I believe. To get into the market, we have to have people who understand that value set of Agile, or at least that we need to talk about that value set, and that we need to help our teams to do that. But one aspect is not, the difficult aspect is now, as I said, you don't talk about values, you live your values, helping people to see it by doing it themselves. You need to do it yourself. Okay, you need to help people to see what is focused by being focused yourself. You need to help people as an Agile leader to be open by being open yourself. You need to help your management and the people in your teams to be courage and have the heart on your tongues to tell people what is really the case by doing it yourself. And Simon Sinek has a very simple idea. He said, every leader creates a circle of safety. And the circle of safety is the idea of the circle of safety is that whoever is in that circle is protected by the leader. The job of the leader is to protect the people within the circle, within the team, within the organization. In an archaic time, 10,000 years ago, that leader was the one who did the fight first. Yeah, he took out his sword or the bat or something, going to the enemy, and they killed the enemy. That's an archaic picture, of course. And in a more modern environment, it's still the same. If you want to protect someone, you are the first who goes to managers. You are the first you talk to customers. You are the first. It's your job to protect your people. And what happens if they feel protected is a very strange thing. They start to orient themselves. You don't need to tell them that they have to orient towards that what the leader tries to do. They do it themselves because they see by the actions of the leaders what is important. And when people start to feel protected and they start to understand what is important and they start to understand the ideas of their team, they start to self-organize into this direction, and they feel combined, verbunden. They feel related. They create a bond. And now it's a very funny thing. That's the last thing, and I would like to explain. Gerald Hüther, a neuroscientist in Germany, a very famous neuroscientist in Germany, made something very clear. We humans, we have two common needs, and they look like they are separate from each other. They're in different directions. One is called autonomy. People would like to do their own decisions. You can see this with my little girl, She always says, I would like to do myself. She wants to decide herself. That is autonomy. In the next moment, and that is a strange thing, and that happens, the thing happens if a leader creates that circle of safety. People would like to create bonds. They would like that they're part of a team, part of a society, part of a community. They would like to be part of a community. And Agile, what I really believe is, Agile leadership is the first time in history that we are able to do that. We can create highly effective autonomous teams and people, helping people to do really what they want and bond together toward a common goal. And that's called Agile leadership. Thank you very much. I just killed you a couple of minutes. Any question? Or is that too frightening to talk about in front of 200 people? Come on, courage. Is there a question? Ah?
I just got set up. But anyway, I'm going to run with it. So, when inviting people into teams, what challenges do you come across from an organizational perspective?
The real challenge is that you need to allow people create their teams that they want to create, right? And it's completely frightening. I mean, for instance, you have a company, like myself. We have now 60 people. And then you always have this idea of, and that's in our cultural mindset, leadership creates the strategies. But if you have an agile organization, a strategy is created typically on the fringe. So every team should should be part of the strategy. Basically, that's the idea of objective and key results. So the basis of people creates the strategy, okay? And then you have two problems. First, people on the fringe need to understand that it's their job to to be part of the strategy. And the second, that's the more complicated issue, you need to accept that as a leader. And then it might be not part of your own strategy anymore. And then you need to think about, is it still part in a more broadly strategy, or do we need to change the strategy in all, or do you just accept that people will leave or change their own life in a different way? Was this helpful?
Thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah, I think Adele's got one.
These are the speakers. I mean, come.
So I am an outsider to the Agile community. As I'm working in IoT, I see that we have resemblance, a lot of them. But can you tell me, so I'm going to be frech a bit, and I'm going to ask, like, so what? So why would I care about it? You know, if I would be a company, so what?
That's so funny. IoT, digitalization, right? Do you have any? I have a strong belief, and I'm not a scientist, and I would love if someone starts doing a doctorate about that topic. Digitalization and agile leadership, or agile, goes together. The people who invented the new technologies 20 years ago in Silicon Valley are also the ones who invented new management approaches. Why? Because you need a different kind of setup if you would like to be very fast. And now the funny thing happens, and that's the last part, and then obviously I have a higher demand to meet here. A classical organization is more effective or more efficient than a traditional marketplace. Why? Because the information in a traditional organization in the former times was transported faster than on a marketplace. It's easier if you have a very clear chain of command to disseminate information up and down, if it's a small company. A marketplace has a different issue. A marketplace, you need to shout, you need to talk, and to be very loud. Come on. And the reason why agile organizations now impossible is digitalization created communication costs below zero. It's super, super cheap to communicate. And now you can broadcast all the time. It's super cheap. And that's the reason for her kind of services. Thank you very much. Have fun.